A 4,000-acre lake in North Florida has disappeared. Not flooded, not polluted. Drained into a single 28-foot hole at the bottom of its own basin. As of this week, Lake Jackson, just outside Tallahassee, is mostly cracked mud and stranded lily pads. 12 billion gallons of water have funneled into the Floridan aquifer in roughly 5 months. People are now walking down into the sinkhole at the bottom of the dry lake bed to hunt for fossils. The Northwest Florida Water Management District has just issued only its third water shortage warning in 26 years. The National Weather Service has placed the region in extreme drought. At the adjacent Cascade Lake, cypress trees stand fully exposed, marked by a sharp band of pale bark 10 feet up their trunks where the water used to be. But here is the detail that tells the real story. On May 4th of this year, 2 men, Matt Lisenby and Michael Sellers, were photographed by the Tallahassee Democrat searching for fossils inside Porter Sink. Not next to it, inside it. They were standing on rocks that on any normal year of the last quarter century would be under more than 20 feet of lake water. And the strangest part of this story is not that Lake Jackson disappeared. It is where the water went, and what is waiting at the other end of the underground river it just joined. To understand what is happening, you have to understand the lake and the hole in its floor. The drain began on Thanksgiving week of 2025. Late November. The Big Bend of Florida had already been in drought for months. Stormwater stopped feeding the basin. Evaporation kept pulling. And on the bottom of the lake, in a section called Porter Sink, the sediment plug that normally seals the floor began to give way. By November 30th, Rob Diaz de Villegas, the ecology producer at WFSU Public Media, was at the lake at sunset. He photographed water cascading down into Porter Sink like a bathtub draining. By December 2nd, the basin sat exposed, 28 feet of cavernous sinkhole staring up at the sky. A brief rainstorm refilled it for less than 2 weeks. By January 6th, it was drained again. By March, the lake bed was sprouting vegetation. By the time the Tallahassee Democrat sent a photographer out on April 20th, Lake Jackson, measured at 6.2 square miles at full pool, was, in their words, almost completely dried up. A bobcat was photographed running across what used to be a boat ramp. And on May 4th, 2 men climbed down into the sinkhole to look for fossils. Zoom out, and the geography makes the mechanism clear. Lake Jackson sits in northern Leon County, Florida, just off Interstate 10 and 10 minutes from downtown Tallahassee. It is a karst lake, a body of water lying on top of dissolved limestone. There are no rivers feeding it, and no outlets carrying water away. It is a 42 square mile closed basin where rain pools in. 2 natural drain plugs sit in the floor. Lime Sink at the north end and Porter Sink at the south. When the plugs hold, you have a lake. When they fail, the lake has nowhere to go but down. This is the part the headlines do not capture. The water draining into Porter Sink is not lost. It is being routed. Harley Means is the state geologist of Florida with the Florida Geological Survey. He climbed down into Porter Sink himself during the 1999 dry down. He compares Lake Jackson to a checking account. When more water comes in through rainfall than leaves through evaporation, seepage, and the sinkhole, the account stays positive and the lake rises. When the deposits stop, the account drains. But that explanation hides what is actually happening underground. In 2018, a team led by Dr. Sean McGlynn of McGlynn Laboratories, who is also chair of the Wakulla Springs Alliance, poured tracer dye into Porter Sink. They wanted to know where the water actually goes. It traveled south, 30.6 kilometers, about 19 miles, through the labyrinth of the upper Floridan aquifer. The dye emerged at Wakulla Spring, one of the largest first magnitude springs on Earth, 35 days later. Average speed underground was 0.87 kilometers a day. Lake Jackson, in other words, is not disappearing. It is moving, slowly, invisibly, under 19 miles of pine forest and karst plain, to resurface at one of the most famous springs in the world. Now here is the part nobody is putting on the news. For most of the last 200 years, Lake Jackson drained roughly once every 20 years. The native Muskogee name for the lake was Oki-Heepki, which means disappearing waters. Drains were documented in 1829, 1907, 1932, 1957, 1982. Then something changed. Since the late 1990s, the lake has drained, partially or fully, in 1999, 2001, 2006, 2012, 2021, and now 2025. The interval has collapsed from 2 decades to a handful of years. And the 2025 cycle is colliding with the worst drought in Tallahassee's recorded history. In February of this year, the Northwest Florida Water Management District issued a water shortage warning order. It is the third one in the district's history. The previous 2 were in 2002 and 2007. All 5 Florida water management districts are now under simultaneous shortage warnings. The state itself is running a deficit. So Lake Jackson did not just disappear, it was set up to disappear by the longest dry stretch in Tallahassee history, falling on a basin that already had a drain in the floor. Impacts begin at the lake's edge and ripple outward. At Falk Drive Landing, the boat ramp ends in mud. Local birders, who used to track waterfowl across open water, now track shorebirds picking through cracked sediment. Fish populations, bluegill, largemouth bass, and gar have compressed into the few remaining deeper pools at Church Cove and McGinnis Arm. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission's Chris Paxton, a biologist with the Division of Freshwater Fisheries Management, has said the refill will eventually benefit the lake. But homeowners watching 12 billion gallons disappear from their backyards are not focused on the silver lining. 12 miles south, the same story is unfolding at Cascade Lake near Tallahassee International Airport. Cypress trunks that were submerged a year ago now stand exposed for 10 feet up their bases, marked by a sharp band of pale bark. Further out, the systemic stakes get bigger. The Floridan aquifer, the system Lake Jackson is now feeding, provides the drinking water for the entire Tallahassee metro area, nearly 400,000 people. It feeds Wakulla Spring, which is already on Florida's impaired waters list. And it is the same aquifer the rest of Florida is pumping harder during this drought. And then there is the existential question buried in the Florida Geological Survey data. If a lake that used to disappear once every 20 years now disappears every few years, what does that say about everything else built on top of the Floridan aquifer? For now, the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Tallahassee says a stalled cold front this week could deliver 1 to 3 inches of rain across the Panhandle and the western Big Bend. It is welcome. It is also, in Dr. McGlynn's words, almost certainly not enough. To keep the sinkhole basin underwater, Lake Jackson needs consistent 3 to 6 inch rainstorms. Half-inch showers, he says, evaporate before the next one arrives. The Atlantic hurricane season opens on June 1st. A single tropical system could refill the lake in days. Without one, the basin is likely to remain exposed through the summer, with vegetation growing across the bottom, fossils visible inside the sink, and the Floridan aquifer absorbing whatever the lake delivers next. There is one more thing the data does not yet answer. Porter, sink, does not stay open forever. Sediment will eventually plug it again, the same way it has plugged itself for at least 2 centuries. But nobody can say when. So 3 questions hang over the basin tonight. How long will Lake Jackson stay gone? Why is the cycle accelerating? And what does it mean that one of the largest springs in the world is now receiving 30 days worth of an entire Florida lake? The water that filled the lake on Thanksgiving morning is right now somewhere beneath the Pine Flats between Tallahassee and Wakulla, moving at less than 1 kilometer a day in the dark toward the surface. Porter, sink is still draining, the aquifer is still rising to meet it, and somewhere south of the lake, in the limestone, the next 40,000 acre-feet of Lake Jackson is on its way to Wakulla Spring.